All right. Well, let's kick things off. So thank you everybody for hopping in today. I know it's probably a busy day, a busy work day in the middle of Q4. And things get pretty hectic, obviously, for us marketers. So again, really appreciate you joining. So today we're going to talk about first-party data strategies to really survive digital marketing beyond 2023. So I think we all know, or maybe most of us know, that in early 2020, Google first announced that it was removing third-party cookies from the Chrome browser, which has actually since been postponed to 2024. But also Apple devices have been phasing out cookies as well, and brands of all sizes really have less than 2 years to transition into a world without third-party cookies to really be effective. It's the loss of third-party cookies is certainly extensive, and everybody has to sort of rethink what that strategy is going to be and what sort of tech elements are going to come into play. And I'm really excited to have Kapil Vyas with me, who is the Chief Marketing Technologist at Position Squared. Kapil, you want to just quickly introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Dave. My name is Kapil Vyas, and I have almost 15 years of experience working in the digital marketing space, specifically working with the corporate branding, product marketing campaigns, like for a number of healthcare and personal care product and technology companies, specifically in the space of B2B and B2C. In that capacity, like I have worked myself like in a strong data-driven and build a strong data-driven campaigns and marketing. And I'm looking forward to speaking with you guys on this topic today.
Fantastic. And really quick about me, I'll be leading the discussion today. I have a well-rounded career and experience in B2B digital marketing, product marketing, account management, and biz dev in startups and early stage companies. Right now, working with Arena Calibrate, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But so let's go over to what we're going to talk about today. So in terms of agenda, we're first going to start talking about what to look out for in 2023. So what's coming down the pipeline. And then we're going to shift gears and talk about how to evolve campaign performance with effective first-party data strategies, and talk about some of the top first-party data-driven models that you can actually use and take away to bring to your own companies and marketing efforts. And then last but not least, we'll open up for questions, and Kapil will be happy to answer those for you. So let's dive in. So yeah, prepare yourself for 2023. It's going to be an interesting year. Obviously, things are shifting. So Kapil, maybe you could talk a little bit about third-party cookies. What's happening in that space, right? And what's changing?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you can see, like in the name of consumer privacy, like browsers are phasing out third-party cookies. Like, what does that really mean is that if you see like Chrome or Firefox or Safari browsers, which are kind of a major browsers in the market today, cookies are nothing but a small piece of text files that pretty much drops or stays in your browser that tracks the consumer behavior. And when these cookies are going away, our ability to identify these users or their behavior is also being taken off. Like, now, this is not really limited to the browsers, but you'll see IDFA, which is an Apple identifier for advertisers. What we have seen in the case of Facebook and Apple advertising, starting from iOS 14.5, that IDFA has been retracted by the Apple in their operating system, which again taken away our ability to track those consumer or identifiers basically from their mobile devices. And you will see AAID, which is again a Android identifier or Android advertisers ID, which will also be going away this year, like as Google announced. So these are basic things which are happening in the market, but it has a huge impact the way we target and run our digital marketing campaigns.
Cool. Now, does it impact mobile as well as web? What is impacted specifically?
Absolutely. So as you see, like web and mobile web means like the browsers running on your devices, mobile devices, we call it as a mobile web. It does impact, like in a way, the cookies are dropped in the browser, but specifically on the mobile platform itself, I mentioned like IDFA and AAID for Android and iOS platform. So their impacts are kind of similar, kind of they behave the same way, but in technological terms, like we call it as a cookies in the browser, but on the devices, we call it as a IDs basically.
Got it. Oh, that's helpful.
Yeah.
So moving on.
So here's the example, what I would like to get into a little more details around. So what it means, like when we say cookies are going away or devices IDs are being retracted. Specifically, this is an e-commerce example. If you take a look at like when a prospect visits your website, as I mentioned earlier, like the cookies been dropped, which track the consumer behavior when they come back to your website on consequent days. For example, in this case, like on day 10, when prospect revisit your site, or on day 15, they do a conversion event, we call it as add to cart, or they continuously moving down funnels. Like these are the events which happen, but the way we identified these user or connect with the user behavior is through the cookies, basically. Now, and obviously we remarket that consumer. If you have seen, like many times you will say, oh, you have a checkout item to your cart. Actually, what does that really happens is like we are running a remarketing campaign. So within that campaign, we add that user identifier through the cookies, which is a basic tracking mechanism. Now, when that going away, our ability to day 10 and onwards is also going away or taken off. Now, consequently, if that user comes back to your site, you cannot differentiate between its revisit or first time visit actually, and you cannot really add that person to a remarketing campaign. So this is a basic example, but as I mentioned, is a huge impact on the way you run your remarketing campaign.
That's helpful. And so, again, you mentioned that this is particularly relevant for e-commerce marketers. And, obviously in e-commerce, it's very important to have messaging frequency within the prospect across their user journey. But also curious, how would this impact B2B flows as well?
Yes. So in the case of B2B flows or any other basic brand campaigns, or in that case, like you don't run an e-commerce segment. So let's say if a user visits your website and you would like to remarket or retarget that consumer who visits your product pages. Again, the basic simple remarketing campaign will not work because your ability to track that consumer, whether it's a e-commerce example or whether it's a B2B example or whether it's a simple website example, when you're running a plain simple campaigns to add that retargeting audience list, this whole thing will impact your bottom line of a remarketing campaign that you run on your marketing platforms actually.
Yeah, no, thanks. That's helpful. And so, is there anything else that could help us understand where things stand today?
Yes. So with that said, like we talked about like cookies being going away, or we talk about IDs being retracted. Other than that, like what we have also seen, like in the name of consumer privacy, like you have seen some privacy regulations being impacted in case of California Consumer Privacy Act, which limits or which gives you consumers an option to opt out from tracking or do not sell. So that again needs to be very well considered when you're running your digital marketing campaign. And we have seen like when these cookies are going away, you will limit your ability to target these consumers. So again, that will impact your way you run your audiences or your campaigns actually. So other than that, like reaching the right audience has always been a question in marketers like you and me. Like we always want like to make sure that our campaigns are niche and target to our consumers who are in the market for your product and services. And then finding the real target or tracking the real return on your advertising spend or a return on your investment in these campaigns has always been a challenge for us actually. So, and eventually what you have seen, like with all the factors bought in on the left-hand side on the screen, you will see today marketers are looking into reduction in their revenue and ultimately the reduction on advertising spend actually. So as I mentioned, like with these forces in play today, we should really think about an alternate strategy, like what we should be focusing on moving on 2023, because eventually you would like to make sure that the money that you spend on your campaign to bring your conversions in is working actually. And that's our objective in next few slides to talk about.
Yep, and you include iOS 14 here, but also what about Android, right? Do you see challenges, of course, with Android devices as well?
That's correct. So Android devices, as I mentioned earlier, it's all hinge on to your advertiser ID. So we talked about Android advertisers identifier. We call it as a AAID. And at some point of time, Google is also planning to take that ID off the way Apple did for iOS 14 onwards, actually. So it will impact both Android and iOS devices at some point of time in this year, actually.
Yeah, that's good to know, and that's helpful. Yeah, so it truly is impacting the full mobile landscape, as well as the browser landscape as well. So at this point, let's shift gears a bit and talk about using first-party data strategies, and what you could do to effectively track campaign performance, with those. So yeah, Kapil, we'd love to hear from you on this.
Mm-hmm. So moving on, if you see what we just said, like when the cookies and identifiers no longer exist, or they've been retracted, or they live very short amount of time, which couldn't help us the way we run our campaigns. Now we are focusing, or we are turning our attention to the first party data by building the effective, our own data-driven strategy, and also looking beyond, like in terms of cutting edge technologies like machine learning, building data models, and building that sort of kind of technological advantage from what we learned in the past, and kind of moving ahead in next few years. So we'll talk about all these things coming up. That's our objective, to kind of go through the basics of our own data and kind of come up with our own marketing strategy on that. Okay, so we all are thinking now, enough of talking, what exactly you mean by first party data. At a basic, this first party information is it's an accurate piece of data that business has collected. It directly came from your own visitors or your own consumers of your business and product and services, actually. So this is information, this is a piece of information which your consumers are willingly giving to you. This is a consent based, this is fully authorized. This is accurate piece of data that you have collected, because these are the clients or consumers or visitors who come in contact with your channels, your brand. These are your business touch points, for example, websites, your mobile apps, your kiosk, your own physical stores where these users have visited, like your loyalty programs, like your purchase data. So this is very accurate information that you have collected over the years, from your own consumers. And we are turning our attention to that piece of data that we have in our own repository. And this is pretty much can be used in multiple ways, not only the marketing, but we'll talk about what else you can do with this kind of data that you have for your consumers, actually, or for your clients. So this is what we mean by, or what we meant by when we said first party data strategy. This is your own consumer, your own user base, your own data that you have collected over the years.
Thank you for that. And so, you talk about first party data and what it is, but I think for the audience, maybe you could quickly explain what exactly is first party data. So for example, customers provide permission to track it, but what kind of data point is it? Is it a string of numbers that's being pulled in? Is it email addresses? Is it a name, or any sort of identifiable information? What exactly would it be on the technical side?
Yes, that's correct. So it falls in various different buckets or categories, right? So for example, at a very basic level, your personal identifiable information is first party data. That includes a consumer's name, first name, last name, phone number, email address, that uniquely identify your consumer. Your first party data is a purchase transaction history. For example, a user who bought a specific product how much of quantity of product and services they bought, when did they bought it, what kind of form of payment they made, from which store they bought it, did they visited the website before they move into the store to buy that piece of product or information. Another thing, if your users are calling in for repair of services or products, like that piece of information, your call center is asking them like, oh, give me your name, phone number, address, where are you calling from, your location, like what are you calling about, what's your challenges. Any personalized information that you will see, like a behavior, like what your locales, like what languages they prefer. I'm sure like you, when you go to visit a ATM, your preferences, like what kind of language you like, what kind of location you prefer, what sort of customization that you would like in your behavioral interaction. So all that different data that you collect about that transaction is your first party data, for example.
Yeah, no, it sounds fairly extensive, right? There's a lot of different data points that businesses can track coming from their customers or prospects, right? Yeah, no, and that's definitely helpful.
So as I said, like what else you can do with your first party data? So on the left hand side in the screen, what I'm trying to show is like, this is different channels when your consumers are interacting with your brand or your product or your services. Mobile is one form of interaction. Any digital interaction that includes your website or any sort of mobile web or website interactions. Your own customer relation management data platform, point of sale is one of the interaction. Data warehouse is another part. So any of the collection that you can do or that can be happening on your user interactivity or come in contact with your point of channel can be brought into your own digital warehouse or a data warehouse. And from that point onwards, you can take number of different actions actually. For example, you can lift your return on ad spend based on that data in your advertising example. You can also bring in some personalization to your consumer actions, basically. So as I mentioned, like now you have this data which you have collected about your consumers. Now you know what language they speak, what color they like, which location they live in, what are their hours of operations or business hours or preferences of those operations are like, and that will in turn include or increases their engagement with your brand or your services, basically. And obviously in marketing, we are driven by the trust. Like once consumers started trusting your brand, your advertising, your personalization, they would like to do more business with you. And eventually, this is a real-time insight that will drive your analytics dashboard actually. Now, how this data is immensely useful in number of these factors, which I just talked about on the right-hand side of the screen. This is not only the advertising, guys, like we are also thinking about once this is such an user-rich information, you can unlock so many different features in the benefit of consumer personalization, marketing, and analytics piece. So with everything come together, what we had said that we have kind of three pillars. I can see them now. When you think of a first party data, first thing is like you can accurately measure and analyze your key performance indicators. For example, your own, like basically like your spend, your impression and clicks. So that will give you a really good outcome. Like when we start from the analytics piece itself, you can build the audience segments on top of the data that you have collected. And we'll get into the little more detail in a few slides. What does that mean like now? Because now you have this data, you would like to build the audiences. And at the same time, you would like to monitor these near real-time performances of your campaigns, which are currently live. So that's where like we are bringing things together, connecting it and activating it in a form of an audiences, and also monitoring and visualizing it, the performances also.
Yep. So so from here, so how can marketers make all of this happen from a technology standpoint? What do they need to think about?
Yeah, so from where we are today, moving on, like I will show you an example how does it all come together actually, when the cookies are going away, when the IDs are retracted, what we left is here in this example is like, at a basic, like you've seen, like you have a analytics platform, like mostly businesses have implemented like Google Analytics or Adobe Analytics, and that gives a tracking method. Like, so this is again a first party analytics platform. And at a basic level, when a user comes to your site, in this example on the screen, what you see is in first block, we call it as a CID, which is nothing but it's like a consumer ID or a cookie ID or your analytics ID, which will always be there actually, which is not going to go away. But again, what going away is the cookies, which, as I mentioned earlier, like which will not be able to track this consumer on subsequent visits actually. So what we are proposing here, and again, this has been a solution which has been out there like by Google and many other technological companies. This is nothing new, but all we are saying is connecting a dots in such a way that benefits your campaigns. Like, so for example, if you can simply connect this consumer IDs to your CRM ID in the block one, what it said is like you are now pulling up your own consumer attributes and attaching to your consumer IDs, like in this example. So first time when the consumer visits your site, at that point, when you attach the ID, you are also bringing in a lot of other attributes in second block when I'm showing you loyalty program IDs, lifetime value, your consumer profiles, like when did they visited store, where they come from, what did they bought, like, so you have all the information that you're attaching to your consumer ID to CRM ID. And then guess what? In slide 3 or in block 3, sorry, you can see in this block, when you send this user CRM attribute to your behavior attribute, you can measure in the analytics piece, and you can push this information back to the Google for your retargeting campaign actually. So what we just said in this example, now you have enriched this information with your own CRM data when user visits your site, which was anonymous user, but now with this connectivity that you just established, now you have made this anonymous user as a known visitor by attaching these attributes. And then you pretty much enrich this information by your own data that you have collected. And then finally, you are taking this data back to your marketing platforms in form of audience targeting actually. So with these audience, which you just built by your own intelligence, by your own first party data, you can take this audience back to Google Ads for display marketing, search marketing. You can take it to the DV360 for third party networks, search ad 360, even Facebook, TikTok, Snap, like all the social media, you can implement search and social use case, kind of cross-platform targeting. So all these things can be unlocked by simply building your own digital or data warehouse of a user enriched information.
Now we talk about Google Analytics and also CRMs, which include either HubSpot or Marketo, and there's tons of other inbound marketing platforms or CRM platforms out there, for that matter. But does every business have a unique identifier ID for customers? And really, how practical is it to identify with an ID?
That's correct. So that's a wish list, Dave. Like, we should have a unique identifier. We call it as a unique ID for each client. So you can uniquely identify a consumer behavior by their buying habits, their actions, their past purchases, their likes, their profiles. That way, if you have noticed, like we call it as a CRM 360, many different platforms has many different forms and names. Some businesses has built this kind of a repository in a custom format, something they bought it off the shelf, but a unique, it's a unique record which every user should have it, a unique identifier in your business. So yeah, that's true. Like, everybody should have that. And that make your life so easy when you target these consumers in different platforms actually. Okay.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So it just creates a more scalable option across technology to have an ID. Okay. And so what else, is there anything else that companies can do with the data?
Yeah, absolutely. In this example, what we just talked about, like with the unique identifier in place, actually, what we are also proposing is you can build machine learning models looking forward, like in this year, or next year, what we have seen, these machine learning models are based on the data warehouse that you just built on your historical first party data that you have collected. Now, models are nothing but these are in different or they have a different utility. For example, client lifetime value model, we call it as a CLV model. You must have heard about in marketing like recency, frequency, and monetization model. Obviously, we all know churn model actually. But so these are different use cases that you can unlock with your data that you have collected. Now, these are machine learning models I'm talking about, guys. Like, so in this case, let's say you would like to bucket your clients who has a affinity towards certain brand or certain products, or these are the, let's say you wanted to build a purchase model like for 30, 60, and 90 days purchase, like which kind of audiences bought what kind of product in last 30 days. And obviously, what you have seen, like you can also build a predictive model. So for example, likelihood to buy certain product and services actually based on the previous historical machine learning model that you have. You will train that model based on your past history, historical data. And then when a new user comes to your website, you will be able to predict that whether this user or what's the likelihood of buying this product by this user, because this user has certain features and categories that he has depicted or you have stored in the kind of similar behavior that you have noticed with the other users or consumer data that you have. That will be an immense benefit for your business actually by bringing in the data and the content together. Now that sort of intelligence which you can build on your warehouse or first party data can be used to let's say building audience list or delivering a personalized experience or kind of predicting your conversions like towards certain categories that you might be thinking about your campaigns actually. So this is a huge, I can see like a potential benefit that business can get out of the data that we just talked about in your own warehouse or data warehouse.
Got it. And it's interesting too. Like I was reading the past few weeks, there was actually a study done by the IDC market research team. So it showed that ineffective data management actually costs organizations 20 to 30% of revenue every year, which is substantial, right? That's 1/3 of that's taking a third away of the revenue that they could be making. Right. And so I think, yeah, thinking about this deeply and setting this up for your organization will actually generate ROI once it's implemented and executed properly. So I found that really, really interesting.
Yeah, and just to add quickly to that, like data without an action is of no use actually. So what we are really proposing is like you not only bring the data in, but you act on it by kind of building a predictive model in it. And then not only that, but then what we are proposing is to take that data back to your audience targeting platforms. You're not stopping there. I'll talk to you in next few slides. Like you would like to bring that sort of a feedback loop back to your business to enrich this model back. So it should be, if you think about it, it should be a closed loop cycle, which continuously churning out and optimizing to a level where your business can benefit from your own data that you have collected over the years, actually. So here's an example. What I would always like to go back when we think of, people will say, okay, how Zoe Financial has really kind of lifted our conversions to 60% of the sales, like by simply bringing in an offline conversion events to their campaigns. Like what at a simple level, what did they do is like they store all this data in HubSpot, which is a CRM platform. We all know about that. Like, but then what they did was like they bought that data back to the Google Ads campaign. And this is what we were talking about in the previous slides. When you have a CRM ID, when you bring or when you take that data back or a conversion data back to the Google Ads, will optimize further your campaign, and you will see a lift of almost 60% what Zoe Financial have seen in their campaigns actually. So this was a very simple use case, but see the huge impact that has spot on their own advertising campaigns actually. Another very good example or use case we have seen, like Chloe Learning. Customer Match is another offline, or basically it's a feature where you can push your data to Google using their own PII, hashed PII information. And again, like as I mentioned previously, like you have HubSpot CRM, and by just simply matching your own client conversion data, by almost like they have lift or they have seen a lift of almost 190%, like, and while decreasing the cost of conversion by 17%, which is a big lift in terms of just simply bringing your own conversion data back to the Google platform in a way that kind of enrich your own campaign and optimize to a level where you'll see a huge lift in your conversions actually. So I will always like to talk about these two examples like as a really good case study when you think of your own data warehouse solution.
Yeah, I mean, I think we'd all love to decrease the cost of conversions by 17%, right? It's a good number.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, you know, there'll probably be some questions too from the audience of like, you know, how much would it maybe actually cost to set up all of this, you know, set up the right technology flows, set up the right infrastructures to measure, store, track, analyze the first party data to be actually, you know, to actually optimize the flow throughout. But yeah, so I think this is a good time to segment over to and talk about some ideal first party data driven models and what and ways you can think about digital marketing for 2023. So Kapil.
Yep. So here I would like to talk about a really basic digital marketing architecture, what we can all to bring things together, right? As you mentioned, like what it takes to think about it, like, and where do we start? And so at a very basic, like when you think of digital marketing channels, like I'm sure like we talked about, or you have multiple channels, like where or touch points for your clients to your business, basically in this vertical, we just talked about channels like website, retail store, mobile apps. But then the important piece here is data collection, actually. So in this swim lane, we talked about like what are the other data collection platforms, like we talked about Google Tag Manager, Telium, Adobe Launch. These are some of the ways you can implement a consent-based, privacy-focused data collection platform. Always think of these verticals like in a play when consumer comes to your website, a data collection platform is activated. You might have any of these platforms, but eventually in this lane, you will see that a data management layer, when things come in together, you are bringing in the raw data in your Google BigQuery platform, for example, or you can have any other data warehouse, for example, Azure or AWS for that matter. But again, the functionality wise, it all works together kind of same. So I'm kind of proposing a architecture where you can think of these verticals in play to bring in a data enrich or data rich kind of end-to-end flow. And then on fourth vertical, you always think of now you have a raw data or a aggregated data in data management layer. The next layer is how do you analyze it? Like, so what analytics platform that you have built? Google Analytics is one of them. You can bring in Adobe Analytics. I'm sure like different businesses adopted different analytics platform. And we have also talked about Arena Calibrate being one of them, like who kind of bring in all the raw data and kind of provide a visualization and aggregated layer. And Dave, you'll talk to them about in a minute. But then this is where things come in together actually. And then finally, it's a visualization layer, which you will see here, like a Looker Studio, QuickSight, like Tableau. So at a high level, if you see end to end from left to right, like you will see this is how the data life cycle for say like is really critical for a marketer to understand like where it starts and how does it flow all the way in near real time. Kind of gives you a really insight about how it's functioning or the health of your organization in terms of marketing conversions.
Thanks. And yeah, and it's interesting too. Like there's another stat that I saw that it was around 38%. So less than half of brands that embrace first party data strategies have the technology to bundle that data with context and actually categorize it usefully. So I think this good understanding of what sort of technology to integrate to help streamline the flow and transfer of data is I think extremely helpful. Okay, so this is a good moment to quickly talk about Arena Calibrate, who's sponsoring this webinar today, and how the platform can really help you make smarter marketing decisions with first-party data. So real quick, Arena Calibrate offers cost-effective enterprise-level marketing, revenue, and ROI dashboards as a platform which includes data warehousing, data integration, and data visualization, all included. Also, it includes comprehensive setup and support with a whole army of BI experts that operate essentially as an extension to your team. So ultimately, our clients get a single source of analytics truth by bringing all marketing, analytics, e-commerce, platform performance, even sales performance, all into one place, and provides cross-platform and cross-campaign intel and insights. So all in all, it reduces reporting and decision-making bandwidth across your teams. Compared to pulling reports manually, which I think we've probably all experienced this in some way, shape, or form across a career. It can get extremely tedious and leaves room for a lot of additional insights that could be generated here. So all in all, clients can actually see how their efforts are contributing to ROI, return on investment, revenue, and what's driving and impacting their marketing, sales, and revenue funnel. So if you would like to request a free consultation, anyone in the audience, on setting up or optimizing first-party data strategy methodologies, or even setting up what sort of elements you need for your specific company in terms of a tech stack, feel free to write to us. There's an email here, freeconsultation@thearena.ai. And just real quick too, here's a sample of some of our 300 plus customers that we've worked with for Arena Calibrate, which span all different industries, across B2B as well as B2C companies, and overall support their marketing, ROI, or return on ad spend analytics. So from here, we want to talk about first-party data collection and maybe a framework that we can provide to everybody. Kapil, you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yes, Dave. So basically, what I'm proposing here is like as a benefit of attending this webinar today, I'd like to give away this simple audit framework or a first-party data collection framework worksheet. The idea is to take this worksheet, think about your own data collection framework, like in step 1. We talked about in an architecture, like what channels that your business has that interact with your clients. Are you collecting the data in a consent-based environment? Are you in compliance with privacy and other CCPA and other practices, GDPR and stuff like that? So if you walk this through steps here, like step 1 is the data collection. We have given some examples here, some platforms and solutions and approaches for your own benefit, which you can checkbox it and see like how does it work for your own organization, or you find any gaps here. Like, for example, once you collected the data, what are the next steps? Like, are you collecting the raw data, or you are working some transformation logic around it? Like, for example, some of the platforms you can use out of the box, or you can build your own data transformation layer, which kind of changes the shape from A to B. Like, so for example, if you have a raw data means nothing, but then you would like to identify deep down funnel analysis by transforming your own data. And then in step 3, now you'd like to extract some meaningful information out of your data. We call it as a data segmentation. Now there are some standard platforms out there like HubSpot, Looker, Bluecore, some of these segment engines out there, or maybe you can build your own segment engine. But the idea is to keep you flowing through this kind of data flow or data steps. Actually gives a meaningful understanding of this kind of marketing driven or data driven marketing actually. So in step 4, you will see what kind of enrichment that your data needs. For example, like there are some enrichment platforms like which you can add on top of what you already know. Let's say you would like to get into a consumer graph, like, so you would like to enrich, for example, you only have two email addresses of your client, or you would like to see their locations they are coming from, or their DMA, or their geos they belong to. So that sort of data enrichment you can think of adding on top of data that you already have. Actually, on step 5, you talk about like data exchange with your channel partners, like what's kind of exchange medium that you use when you share your data with your marketing platforms, like search, social, and display platforms. Do you or your businesses send or receive any kind of data in batch mode? Is it happening in near real time by data streaming layer, or is it like simply transferring the file, like, and that is very important to understand, like, did you share your own client data, like your personal identifiable information has been sent out? Is it hashed information, or can somebody can take your data and identify a client, or they cannot? So those are the things, like, this worksheet will help you understand or uncover some of the gaps in your own first party data. And then on step 6, like, once you exchange the data with your platforms, like, do you activate these audiences actually in Google and other social media platforms by sending these audience list for your campaigns? And then, as I mentioned earlier, like, do you get the data back in terms of response consolidation? Like, we talked about, like, how does this response consolidation, like, how does your campaigns are behaving or performing? You get that sort of information back in terms of your spend, your clicks, conversions. And then finally, we would like to bring in a visualization layer, which is where you measure the campaign performance through dashboard mechanism. So everything get connected back to your step 8, where you will see, and these are some of the out of the box platform which you can use to connect your data and kind of see the near real time performances of your campaign.
Awesome. So yeah, I mean, that pretty much wraps up our webinar, and we have some time now for Q&A. There's a few folks who actually added questions throughout the webinar. So I'd like to address those first. The first question was from Haritha, and this is referring to the slide when we were talking about customer IDs. The question here, this was a bit of a statement in the question. So it's an excellent idea for retargeting and LTV tracking. Am I correct in understanding that each consumer will have multiple CIDs over their lifetime?
Yeah, that's correct, right? So as I mentioned, like, you have an option to clear your CID, or you can have multiple CIDs, but then it becomes unique when you attach your own CRM ID by identifying that CID to your own CRM ID. Actually, that's the reason, as you mentioned, Dave, you asked the same question previously, like, the unique consumer or CRM ID is where everything will get unlocked, no matter how much CIDs, because let's say you have 5 different browsers, like every CID is different for each browser, because that's where it'll identify that user. But the actual glue that will happen in your own warehouse, that's the reason when you will bring in that CID to your CRM ID, and all the previous anonymous browsing behavior will be attached to your known CRM ID actually.
Okay, thanks. And then another question here, I hope I pronounced your name correctly, Ajay asked, can you speak on the EU's recent decision that requires Meta, so previously Facebook, to explicitly ask consumers whether they can use their first-party data for targeting instead of just in terms of and conditions. First-party data instead of just in their terms and conditions page on the website.
That's correct. So remember, we always said, like, it's a consent base, it's a privacy compliance practice. So every time we always mention that a data collection is happening when the user gives you a consent. And if they opt out, then obviously we don't collect that piece of information. I'm sure, like, there's a big understanding gap in terms of today, how does Facebook or Meta process that sort of a consent-based approach versus what a unique individual businesses can do about their own consumers actually. So if businesses are collecting the data based on user consent to target or to activate or do not sell, they need to honor the user consent, right? And no matter what, like that step will always be there, and that brings in additional responsibility on businesses now, because now they are collecting the data and they would like to ensure that are they in compliance with these state mandated laws and practices actually. So I've seen organizations should always look into their own data collection practices, the way they target these consumers and then the way they activate these audiences. So it's a big look into their own first party data. That's the reason we are emphasizing on this webinar that we should rethink the way our audiences interact with our channels and the way we collect this piece of information for analytics purposes, for audience activation on our campaigns actually. Do we have a consent? And if we don't, then we have a gap here, and we should rectify those level of details. Again, like this is something like I'm not a legal, but I've seen this kind of practices is happening in the market today, and a lot of businesses are rethinking the way they collect their first party audience data and the way they move forward with that kind of information.
Awesome. Yeah, there's a second part to this question. Considering apps like Netflix and Spotify use first party data for recommendations, is this, and this is within their terms and conditions, do you expect this rule eventually to affect all apps and sites that rely on first party data?
Well, again, as I said, like different use cases, different platforms. Do we have a consent? Yes, like at some point of time in reading those big finer print, like I might have given consent to Netflix to show me the next movie based on my likes and dislikes. But I'm sure I'll be worried if Netflix is identifying me in their campaign, because I'm not giving that consent to them. So anyway, the point is, you can unlock different use cases. So to me, this looks like a personalization use case when Netflix and Spotify is showing me my likes. Everybody will like that, right? So because that's the thing we talked about in the slides, that you can do different things with the data that you have collected. You are helping me show me a new movie. I like Netflix because now Netflix knows me what I like. But then I'll be worried, like if they identified me in some other place. So different use cases, different places, like but how you can do a lot of things. And this is a very good question actually. If I see, we just talked about that level of intelligence that you can build by collecting the data and acting on it and unlocking different use cases, but whether it's in your advertising, whether it's in your marketing campaign, whether it's your own personalization campaign, or you're really simply helping client build a trust with your brand actually. So different use cases, different ways of acting on him, but excellent question. Yeah.
Awesome. And so another question here that came in, at what point or scale in terms of budgets and spend should we consider putting in a first party data strategy?
Yeah, so another very good question. Like in terms of resources, I can start with like what resources we can think of, like at a basic. You might need a data engineer, like who has expertise to build this kind of a data warehouse by bringing different data sources in it, stitching them together. You need a data engineer, you need a data science person to build the data machine learning models. Like you need some sort of a cloud operation person who can monitor the data pipes that you have built for your business. So a couple of technology stack of folks like who can really help jumpstart. And again, it depends upon scale of the work that you're talking here. You can bucket them small, medium, or large scale development. How much of work that you plan to in-house versus outsource in a way that can be readily managed by another cloud or software as a service provider. So you can have, today you have many options to work it out in a budget, small to a large budget. I mean, at a minimum, I'm thinking like a couple of data heavy technology folks can really get started you if you haven't done any work so far. But let's say you already have some data engineers, like you can engage with some consulting organization who can help you guide through this process and fill in any gaps that you might see might exist today. So it's kind of a mixed bag today, like how can you built in-house versus you can offshore or outsource and then have use of software as a service, and you can be a little creative here. But again, I mean, I don't have a fixed number to start with. Like it varied based on what your requirements are actually.
Okay. Yeah, and then thanks for that question. It's actually a really great question. And then we have a question here. What is the best way to maintain data integrity with first-party data? I can see this getting a little bit intensive and complex, obviously across platforms. Any thoughts?
So in terms of data integrity, like you definitely want to make sure that the source is it coming out from the right source of the data, like where it belongs. The other approach you might think of is like putting it in a consistent storage format, verifying the authenticity of the data, accuracy of the information is really helping you keep it in a right shape or format. Actually, validation checks and balances are really important. I mean, nothing critical in terms of what different you will do, rather like you will just follow your best practices that you might be doing when processing your consumer data actually.
Okay, gotcha. And then here's a question: how analytics tools shows I'm sorry, but then let's see how analytics tools shows insights of website if I'm only tracking first-party cookie data.
Let me see.
How will analytics tools start showing insights of the across a website if I'm only showing first-party cookie data?
Yeah, so that's where I think we talked about like stitching things together. Like, so one piece of information is the raw data that the analytics tool or your warehouse will bring in. And then there is an aggregation layer. Like, so basically, if you bring in a behavioral data, which is based on the cookie, but you haven't done a CRM ID attached to it or a campaign identifier attached to it. So in other words, like you got to make a post raw processing, we call it as a data transformation or aggregation. That needs to happen actually. So let's say you run a campaign in different geos, you have different business units, you have different things, but then those data dictionary or metadata about your own campaigns needs to be worked upon, or rules needs to be defined, which will make it your visualization or analytics platforms job easier, or your consumer reporting for in what format they're looking for. So that connectivity has to happen in that piece of layer based on the raw data that you have actually. Or once it's out there, then your visualization layer will work based on your custom requirements that you have set forth for your campaigns actually.
Yeah, no, that's helpful, and that's a great question, by the way. Okay, we have time for one more question before we wrap things up. One last question here is from George. In what ways should first-party data be disseminated across an organization? Any thoughts there, Kapil?
Yeah, excellent question. Again, like it's a very thoughtful way of bringing in data from different channels actually. So the way you bring in the website data is entirely different than the way you think of bringing in your mobile data actually, or your stores data, for example. So the way it disseminate is in different ways. For example, your transaction data is different, like which is coming in from your own ATG, or for in case of an e-commerce example, your own e-commerce platforms actually, or if you have a different channel. So the way it disseminate is the source is different, the repository is different, but when it comes together in a warehouse, it stays there. And then on top of that, like the end goal is to bring in a valuable or insight from the different channels of data that push to your raw data lake actually, or the warehouse. And that's where like things will start coming together. So it might originate from some other place, it can be in a different form, but then it keep moving to a point where it becomes more meaningful and insightful for our own action driven language or format actually. So yeah, I mean, different ways will happen, like, but nowadays you will see most platform does support formatting and transformation of this data actually.
Yeah, and that's a great question, right? I mean, I think it's important to think cross-functionally how this data, the first party data is, you know, being pulled in, how it could really benefit you know, other teams in the organization.
Yep.
Yeah, thanks for that question. Thanks for answering that. So yeah, so that about wraps it up for today's session. I want to thank everybody for joining today. Just as a heads up, we'll be sending a follow-up with the recording and takeaway materials today to everyone that registered. So definitely keep an eye out for them. And I want to wish everybody a productive week and a happy holiday season coming up. And thank you, Ian Kapil, for taking the time to connect today.